gonna be honest, I don't even know if storytime videos are still a thing here on YouTube. I feel like at one point everyone and their mother was posting videos about how their Uber driver kidnapped them, or they had a stalker, or like some crazy roommate stories, but I haven't really had that many things happen in my life that were like worthy of a storytime video, I guess. That was until this situation. This definitely isn't going to be the craziest story you've ever heard, but I definitely think it's entertaining. So if you guys are interested in hearing why I had to spend 3.5 hours in the emergency room on the night of the Super Bowl, then make sure to keep on watching. So for those of you who might be new here, hey, what's up? My name's Dani. I am not really the person who tends to step outside of her comfort zone too much, and because of that, I don't really find myself in too many crazy scenarios. And looking back, this story definitely could have happened to anyone, but I think the entire sequence of events that went into this story make it really, really interesting. So this story, like I said, takes place on Super Bowl Sunday. So one of my best friends and roommates, Lucy, is actually from Pennsylvania. So when it was said that the Eagles were going to be in the Super Bowl, she started talking about how much fun it would be if we all came with her to Philly to experience the Super Bowl firsthand in the middle of Philly. So I figured that this was not something that I wanted to pass up on. So my roommate Brooke, Lucy, and I all decided to take a trip to Philly for that entire weekend. So we kind of just spent the entire Friday and Saturday leading up to the game relaxing and hanging out at Lucy's house and meeting all of her friends from home, which was so much fun. And then on Sunday, we actually had a hotel room booked at the Ritz-Carlton. And this Ritz-Carlton was located 5 minutes walking distance from the main street called Broad Street in Philly. So when the game officially started, we decided it would be fun to jump around from restaurant to restaurant, and we actually ended up in a place on Broad Street when the Eagles won. So that was just the ideal location, and it was definitely the craziest thing I have experienced in a really long time when the Eagles won, because all you saw was a bunch of people rushing out of bars and restaurants on Broad Street and going crazy in the streets. I'm gonna try and insert as many videos as I have, but people were climbing up on telephone poles, people were sitting on, like, I don't even know what you call them, like storefronts. Like there was a Dwayne Reed right next to me and people were sitting on the letters that spell out Dwayne Reed, which I don't even know how they got up there, but it was just the craziest thing I have ever seen. Regardless of how into sports I am, when I'm around people who are really into sports, I become just as into them as they are. So people were in the streets screaming and chanting all of these Eagles chants, and I was right along with them, just like screaming my head off and just having the best time ever. Like all of us were just having the best night, and we were celebrating the street for, I would say, probably 45 minutes to an hour, and at one point we looked at each other and we were all kind of ready to go home, so we decided to walk back to the Ritz-Carlton. I don't know how easy this is going to be to explain to you, but I'm gonna do my best. So say this is Broad Street, and we're like celebrating and going crazy on Broad Street, and our hotel, the Ritz-Carlton, is right over here. So it's like, this is Broad Street, this is our hotel. So we kind of, in order to go back to our hotel, had to move in the complete opposite direction as everyone else. So that was definitely a challenge because there were so many people in the streets that there was barely room to breathe. So as we started walking in the direction of our hotel, I guess because everyone was going in different directions, I ended up getting pushed. And it wasn't pushed where like I fell to the ground, but I stumbled. So when I stumbled, and this is the beginning of the story, I ended up falling in between two like beams on a plaque, I guess, that was on the floor. And there we go, there was a nail sticking up on this plaque that I stepped on, and it went right through my shoe and right through my foot. Sorry if that was a little graphic, but that is literally the only way that I can describe it. This nail went right through my Adidas sneaker and right through my foot, and it was, I kid you not, the most excruciating pain I have ever experienced in my life thus far. So obviously when that happened, I started screaming my head off because I was in so much pain. And because I had been screaming along with all the Eagles fans the entire night, none of my friends really noticed the difference in my scream. That was until they turned around and saw me like clutching my foot and bawling my eyes out. And at that point, it was just so hectic that no one really knew what to do. So my roommate Lucy, who is a saint, decided to put me on her back and start running me to the nearest police officer, I guess. I really don't know what was going through her mind at that point, because at that point, all I kept on thinking about was how much pain I was in, but her first instinct was to go to a police officer, which was totally reasonable. So she ran me to a police officer on her back for like 5 minutes through like crazy crowded streets. And the entire time she's running me there, we had to get people out of our way. So my roommate Brooke is in front. She's like, pregnant woman coming through, like yelling all these crazy things just to get people out of our way. And it was honestly, if I wasn't in so much pain, I would have been dying laughing. It was so funny. But then 5 minutes later, Lucy ends up getting me to a police officer, and this police officer, I guess he was just as excited as everyone else that the Eagles won, so I don't really think this was his top priority, but she ended up running me over to this police officer and kept on saying that I had a nail in my foot, and he sat me in the back of his car, took off my shoe, saw the nail, and then looked at Lucy and was like, distract her. So Lucy grabs my face and she was like, you're gonna be okay, Dani, you're gonna be okay. And in one swift motion, the police officer took the nail and yanked it out of my foot. And looking back, that was definitely the wrong thing for him to do, because it's like a known rule that when you have something in your foot, you're not supposed to take it out, because like it just like makes it bleed more and you lose more blood than you already were. So that was definitely not his best move, but I was bawling my eyes out and I looked at the police officer and I was like, am I gonna be okay? Because I was like dramatic and whatever, like obviously I'm gonna be okay. But when I said that, he looked me in the eye and was like, sweetie, I've seen worse things in Iraq. And I felt like saying, I would hope you've seen worse things in Iraq. It was just the strangest answer to my question I could have ever imagined, and I don't know, I guess that's besides the point. So after the police officer made that really weird comment, Lucy asked him again and was like, are you sure that she's gonna be fine? Like she doesn't need to go to the hospital or anything. And he kept on insisting, no, she's gonna be fine. So Lucy put me back on her back. He put his glove, this was also super weird and unsanitary. He put the glove that he was wearing on his hand over my foot, because I couldn't put back on my shoe or my sock because it was covered in blood. And he put his glove over my foot. And then Lucy put me back on her back and walked me over to the hotel. By the time we got to the hotel, I was still in excruciating pain, and even more so now that the nail was out of my foot and I just like was profusely bleeding. And by the time we got there, I needed to sit down ASAP. So I was sitting in the middle of this hotel lobby with my foot bleeding like crazy. All of a sudden, I am approached, this like crying girl with a bleeding foot is approached by a Drexel medical student and an EMC from a local hospital that just so happened, didn't know each other at all, and just so happened to be in this one hotel lobby. And right when the medical student saw me, he knew that I was just not okay, so he started like barking all these orders to people who worked at the hotel, asking them to get me a belt so he could like belt off my foot, I guess, and like started cleaning it and like gave me gauze, and he was just like on his shit. This guy was amazing. And then he looked at me at one point, he was like, I don't want to freak you out, but you do need to go to the hospital. Keep in mind, I just met this guy and I still like didn't even know his name at this point or whatever, but he was being so nice to me, and he was just like, he was so great. And honestly, I wish I could thank him now. So, hey, John, if you ever find yourself watching this video, thank you so much. Honestly, all of your help was so appreciated. So after John said that I did in fact have to go to the hospital and I wasn't okay, like the police officer told me that I was, he looked outside and saw how crazy the streets were and figured that I couldn't get an Uber or an ambulance to the nearest hospital. So this man, who I met 5 minutes before this entire thing happened, decides to put me on his back and run me 15 minutes to the nearest hospital. Now I just want you to picture me on the back of a guy that I literally met 5 minutes before this entire thing happened, alongside an EMC who had no idea what was happening really. She was just there with us to make sure that I was okay because that's her job, even though she was off duty, and 3 of my friends. And this entire thing was just so mind-blowing to me because it proved that there are good people in the world, and these 2 random strangers were so invested in my well-being and making sure that I was okay. And even now, like, I'm still mind-blown by that because like there are good people in the world, and these people cared so much for this person that they didn't even know. So for 15 minutes, John carried me on his back to the nearest hotel, and I felt so bad because he was getting so tired throughout that entire process, because obviously it's hard to carry someone on your back for 15 minutes as you're sprinting through a crowd of people. But we ended up getting there, obviously, and once we did, I met with the receptionist and gave her all my information, and at that point, I said goodbye to John and the EMC, who I believe her name was Natalie, but she was such a sweetheart, and I said goodbye to both of them and thanked them a ridiculous amount of times, honestly, and at that point, we ended up waiting in the emergency room for 3.5 hours.
Do you want to see your shoe now?
Do you guys want a water?
Lucy, tell me what they have up there.
What is that cafeteria?
I'm hungry.
While we were in that hospital, I met some of the least attentive doctors I hope to ever meet in my entire life. Everyone in that hospital was really rude and just didn't really know what they were doing, or at least that's what it seemed like. So it took about, I want to say, an hour and a half for me to actually be seen by a nurse. And at that point, they took me back for x-rays, and I didn't really need an x-ray at all because I knew that there was nothing left in my foot, but they wanted to check, so I appreciate that. They took me back for x-rays, and then I ended up being taken into the back room, and I had to get a tetanus shot, obviously, because I had a nail in my foot, and they also wanted to clean it out, which I figured would be a relatively fast process because, I mean, looking back, that really shouldn't have taken too long, but I was in that back room. So say I was waiting in the waiting room for an hour and a half, I was in that back room waiting to get my foot cleaned and to get a tetanus shot for 2 hours. So during those 2 hours that I was in that back room, I met some of the rudest doctors I have ever met in my entire life. People would walk by me and avoid eye contact when I said, "Excuse me," because they didn't want to help me, and I was refused Tylenol and Advil because they didn't want to help me, and it was just like the strangest experience ever. So finally, 2 hours later, I was able to get my tetanus shot and get my foot cleaned. And another thing that I thought was kind of funny was the fact that I got my foot cleaned, and then after people were done cleaning it, they gave me a wrap that was made for people with broken ankles or sprained ankles, not for puncture wounds. So they didn't really know what they were treating, and I didn't really need a full-on like wrap for my foot. I just needed a shoe to make it a little bit more comfortable, and that was something I had to ask for. It wasn't given to me, and I just thought it was so strange. And maybe this doesn't sound like as big of a deal to other people when you weren't experiencing it firsthand, but to me it was just the craziest thing ever. But 3.5 hours later, I was able to leave the hospital, and I had a cute little shoe on my foot, and I walked with a limp for like 2 weeks, week and a half, something like that. And I was given crutches at school because apparently that is what I needed, and the nurse at school was actually appalled by what the hospital had done for me because I didn't have a sprained ankle, I had a puncture wound, but that's how they treated my foot. But now it has been about a month since that entire thing happened, and I'm walking a lot better now. It still hurts a little bit, but definitely not nearly as bad as it was when it first happened. But yes, that is my story. I really hope you guys enjoyed it, and if you did, please make sure to let me know in a comment down below. I would love to hear all of your thoughts, or if something similar has happened to you and you can relate to the story in any way, I would love to hear it. But with all that being said, I will talk to you guys very soon in my next video, and I love you very much. Bye!